here. Happy Tuesday, Samir. How you doing? Let me get us shared.
Yeah, it's a little gloomier today, as you can tell by the lighting. It's not as sunny. Usually the sun comes out just in time for the show. Didn't do it today. It's still hiding behind the clouds.
Well, it's kind of sunny and warm here in San Diego. By the end of the week, it's supposed to be in the mid-80s.
Of course.
So,
winter in San Diego.
Typical January here. We have a fun show today about a not very fun movie.
Emotionally speaking.
Yes. But we have a special guest, so we will be talking about director Lynne Ramsay, and in particular her film We Need to Talk About Kevin. We have a special guest with us today. It is the director herself, Lynne Ramsay.
Lies.
No, it's not. No, we have one of our usual viewers, Mr. Andres Gallego. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. He worked on this film, and he's been watching us for a while now. And so he's going to be joining us today. I'm going to bring him on right now, and then we'll go into our Velvet Goldmine. So here is Mr. Andres in 3, 2, 1. There he is.
Hey-o. How's it going, guys?
Good.
Great.
We're happy to have you. So,
Thank
Andres,
you.
why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we go into our Velvet Goldmine discussion, and then we'll go back to our main subject.
Yeah, no worries. So basically, short gist of it, worked as a PA for a couple of things. I'm primarily an editor, but also I do other things like basically help post up trailers in the evening, and that's all I can say about what I'm doing now.
You signed an NDA with everything else.
well, there's the NDA for the NDA, so
you can't even really say that you've signed an NDA. It's that secret.
Yep.
Too late.
Yeah. Basically moved out to Chicago for a little bit and was kind of going back and forth between there and Connecticut, and as we'll talk about later, just came in at a right time and right place to come in and work on that, and can't wait to just talk about what that movie was.
We can't wait either.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for a little bit of background on you, and in a little bit we'll hear your insight on working on this film. But before that, let's talk about yesterday's movie. We picked Velvet Goldmine, and we talked about Mr. John Rhys. What am I doing?
Jonathan Rhys Meyers.
I was about to say John Rhys Davies. Jesus, people, God, completely different person.
Isn't that the guy in Hellboy?
John Rhys Davies, he's like Lord of the Rings. He's Gimli and Indiana Jones.
Oh, is that actually a person's name? Because also Rhys Davies makes me think of she was somebody who had an affair with a politician named Mandy Rice Davies, who was notorious in the early 90s in England for having had a very public affair with a member of parliament or something. But it was an episode of Ab Bab. So whenever I hear Rice Davies, I think Mandy Rice Davies.
Famous, and all of these clubs I do on here are going to come back to haunt me, and they're going to be like, she doesn't know anything about the film industry. She can't even say their names.
Oh no! Trust me, ladies and gentlemen. You two know a lot. You two constantly are like my film school away from film school, so I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
I'm learning as I go with some of these people. Like his name right here on the freaking poster. I still messed it up. But Jonathan Rhys Meyers, who we talked about in great depth yesterday. Velvet Goldmine. This is a '98 film. One of Samir and I's favorites. It'd been a while for both of us since we'd seen this, and we were texting each other afterwards, just like, oh my God, we kind of forgot. Like, we knew we loved this movie. We forgot just how much we love this movie. And I love how this movie, the whole thing just seems like it's like this lyrical poem, music video type thing. And Samir had a really good point yesterday. He said, this is like the rock musical version of Citizen Kane, which I hadn't even thought of. And then watching it yesterday, I was like, it is.
It's totally the glam rock Citizen Kane. You get the interviews with you get to know the figure by the interviews of the people that knew him best, who it turns out maybe didn't really know him at all because he's such an there was such an emptiness and soul-suckingness to him as a person. That was there a person underneath that flesh facade? Who knows? But you learn that he wasn't even the worst. I'd forgotten how the movie ended. That like the weird like leather Muppet man who's now a star. I'm like, oh, that's why his face looks weird. Surgery.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. Yeah.
But just such the visually stunning film. The music is so great. It has some really great cameos in this. Like I totally forgot that Placebo is in this, and I bought the soundtrack after the fact. We were talking about like what is happening to this movie because we only found this available on one streaming service available to rent, and then I remember years ago I bought one of the songs from iTunes. And like at least 10 years ago. And then I went on iTunes last night thinking like, oh, because I still buy things from iTunes. I thought, well, there were a couple more songs I wanted to get, and it was gone. The album was not available on there at all. And then I went on Amazon and I just ended up buying the actual CD, and there was only like 2 left in stock. We're like, what's happening to this movie?
So when did David Bowie die?
2 years ago.
2018. Early 2019. No, 28.
It was 2016.
No, 2016. I'm sorry. It was like right before Suicide Squad came out. That's all I remember.
Oh, okay. I was wondering if maybe it had something to do with like his death in some way, because I know he was not a fan of this script. Like I said, I believe the reason he was not a fan of it didn't have anything to do with its depiction of the glam rock world. I think it had to do with the fact that it was very, very openly queer, and he in the last 20 years of his career was really trying to distance himself from that queer aspect of his career, which is bizarre. I'm like, Ziggy Stardust is like the gayest alien character ever. Do you like, and you're most famous for that above anything. Do you think everyone's just gonna forget that you were into dudes? Like, it's not gonna happen. Like, it's never going to happen. We've seen Labyrinth. We've seen, we've seen all your concert footage. We know,
Labyrinth.
Like the outfit and the hair in Labyrinth just tells you how much and he's playing with a ball the entire time. He's not hiding anything. But
what's
with 2 balls.
I know his name is Brian Slade. What's his name in here? Maxwell Demon. I mean, that's
Maxwell Demon's his Ziggy Stardust character.
Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, so I thought maybe that had something to do with it, but this movie, according to one of the reviews I was reading, said that it was still on Amazon Prime in 2017, and I remember having this movie permanently on my watch list on Amazon Prime because it was always there, so I always had it there, so I ever felt like watching a sequence or something that, I knew it was available there. I always knew it was there, and then all of a sudden it's like gone. You can't listen to the soundtrack on Spotify, you can't buy it on iTunes. That's got one, like you said, one streaming service left that has it, and it's just strange how much it's disappeared. I do think it's because it's so unabashedly queer in so many ways that it makes some people uncomfortable. It doesn't give you like a perfect hero and villain in the piece. Really, the only like the best part of the story is really Christian Bale's coming out process through his idolatry of these figures who, basically did the same thing that David Bowie did and made it safe to be queer and weird and to wear makeup and to take on a persona and put on a costume and go out, like that made it acceptable for so many other people. It widened what heteronormativity could allow, and it widened some people's sexual tastes in some ways. So I think the movie is like a great testament to that, but at the same time acknowledging that these figures maybe are not people that you can look up to on a personal level. Like on a career and music level, it's fine to acknowledge their genius, but when you try to get to the root of the person underneath, a lot of times it's a way more complicated and less happy a story, but visually fabulous nonetheless.
It is. And going back to Christian Bale, I thought he was so great in this too. I mean, he has to play 2 very different characters as far as like him as a teenager, and now he's an adult and he's this journalist. And even just like the makeup they did on him when he was a teenager was so good. And I don't know. I'm always kind of like hit or miss with Christian Bale. Like I acknowledge he's a good actor, but I'm always just like, he's just not one of my favorites. And I'm kind of alone on that opinion.
I think he's a great actor, but I agree that his choices leave something to be desired at least half the time. Sometimes he'll just make bizarrely bold choices that don't really pay off. And I'm like, you're a way better actor than this. Like, why would you do that? This movie's not worth that commitment. Like The Machinist, not worth it. That was all
using its voice.
It wasn't a great film. I just like,
I thought The Machinist was okay.
But only okay, at best okay. Would you really risk shaving years off your life to starve yourself to skeleton thinness for that film? If you already had an established career, you were already a star, and you didn't need that movie. And it's like, if it's a great film, then but you don't always know when you're an actor. You make the gamble. You think it's going to be something great, and it could not be. But I'm like, that one I just don't see on the page that how it could have appeared to be a great film. But interesting, okay, yeah, but like not worth that commitment that he gave to it in terms of his physical commitment to it, and losing all that weight so unsafely. Because there's no safe way to drop that amount of weight that quickly.
It's not, but there have been many actors that have done that, and many of them.
But I agree. He was the one who sort of rose out, ironically, in contrast, because you get to see him sort of like taking elements of what he's seeing and finding the things that really express who he is in a way. And sort of like the first time he smiles when he puts on a scarf and some makeup and walks down the street in platforms, like your heart warms for him. And it's not usual that you get a movie that wants you to have that feeling with somebody who's putting on makeup and girls' clothes. And, it's like that is a very freeing and beautiful thing to have in a movie that still has like, the light and the dark incorporated. But my favorite moment of the movie, I still think, is that moment when, is it Jack Ferry who they're showing come home from being beaten by the kids in the schoolyard, and his lip is bleeding, and then he's like, and he starts to use it like lipstick, and then creates shiny, glossy lips, and he's like, I'm like, this pretty moment. But also, I want that little like thing that the aliens gave Oscar Wilde when he was a baby. I want the magic of that thing, because that was also my other favorite moment, was when Kurt Wilde, who sounds like, I kept thinking it was Kurt Weill, who co-wrote the Three Penny Opera with Bertolt Brecht. And, it's a very famous figure who one of his songs was then actually covered by the Doors. There's a lot of ties to rock music built into all these names and situations, in ways that you maybe didn't expect. But that little alien thing, I still want that damn thing, because I love that it got passed down to Christian Bale and he tried to refuse it. And then Kurt Wilde like slips in his beer, so he still manages to give this like little magic talisman, almost like this is the source of your powers, like right here. And so now it's like, now he's giving it to this other queer person that he kind of helped come out of his shell by having a fabulous fuck fest on the roof of a building. But I'm like, I need those magic powers. Where are the magic powers?
This movie was so much fun to watch again. Like, I feel like every time I finish watching it, I just want to start it all over again and watch it. It's just so good. I almost did. I wanted to as well. I watched it with my mom. She wasn't like,
yes, Walter, correct.
Back the night,
movie again. This is only available on Vudu to rent. So give this movie a shot while it's still available. We don't know what's going on with this, but this movie needs
or buy a used DVD.
Yes.
Physical will always last.
Just have that, physical media is coming back. Buy used if you can for this, so you're not making them create new junk, but just buy it. You'll be so like, seriously, through this whole quarantine year, having had all these movies that I bought on DVD that are not streaming anywhere. Like, that's the only way you can watch it. Like, luckily I didn't sell everything that I moved to Berkeley with. When I needed food back in college, I saved my most precious ones. This was one of them, and I'm so happy I did.
Velvet Goldmine, when I was in Berkeley, I had Velvet Goldmine was among, like, I would have DVDs that I would cycle in and out, where it's like I go back home pretty often, and then I take some with me and bring some back. Velvet Goldmine was like a permanent, like, I had to have it with me in Berkeley.
Fixture.
I just had to make sure it was always there at my disposal to watch it.
Yeah, no,
But
the first time I watched, sorry, I was like, the first time I watched Velvet Goldmine, it was actually with a back-to-back double feature of I'm Not There, which was Todd Haynes' next movie at the time. And I think both of those are oddly a great pairing because both of them struggle with that source and that theme of identity and who you are and how your art kind of defines you in that sense. So if you have a chance to watch, if you haven't seen Velvet Goldmine, if you want to pull a really cool double feature, watch that and I'm Not There. Which
Excellent
was
suggestion.
yeah, which was the Bob Dylan bio. I mean, sorry, I said I was about to say biopic, but it's like biopic-ish. But
Biopic-ish. It's for the best description for the genre of that film.
yeah. Which you could also say with Velvet Goldmine. I would call that biopic-ish, even though
it was supposed to have all the David Bowie songs, but he was like, "Nope, I don't like your
also
script."
love the opening sentence in this movie. It says, like, even though this film is a work of fiction, it should still be played at maximum volume. Yeah, so good, so good.
Very Wildian statement.
But now let's move on to something completely different. Today's subject, we're like, oh, here we go. But before we go into the movie that's hard to talk about, let's talk about the director of that movie, and that is director Lynne Ramsay. She's someone I have seen a few of her films. She is Scottish. That was not a Scottish accent, but she's Scottish. Born December 5th, 1969. She went to film school. She went to the National Film and Television School in Beaconsfield, England, and she specialized in cinematography and direction. She writes or adapts a lot of her films as well as directing. She started doing a lot of short films in the 90s that were quickly very popular at Cannes and other film festivals. Her first feature film, I believe, was in 1999, and that was called Ratcatcher. Which was also there at Cannes and part of the Edinburgh International Film Festival and things like that. So she's really a film festival favorite. She was supposed to be in a directory of a few other big things like The Lovely Bones, and I think she was supposed to do Jane Got a Gun with Natalie Portman. But she's done some really great films, and a lot of her films are known for these, like, really dark themes with guilt and death and things like that. But some of her other films, her most recent one, feature that came out was You Were Never Really Here with Joaquin Phoenix, which that one's a trip too. That one's very brutal and violent. But she's only done like a handful of feature films and like another handful of short films. But even so, she's definitely the director to watch, especially in England. She's pretty well known there. Maybe not so much here in the US. But we always try and highlight female directors when we can. And
she's one of the best out there. I wonder how long she spends planning these films, because when you watch the films themselves, they're so meticulously crafted. Yes. And also all the elements that you see, like we're going to talk about a director tomorrow who also was like sort of like one of the great masters of essential filmmaking in a way. And what I mean by that is like every single element you see on the screen, everything that's visualized for you is visualized for a specific purpose, and it has a purpose in that story that either becomes readily apparent right away or they're saving it and bringing it back again later. So there's so many tiny visual echoes and situations in this movie particular that like you don't realize, oh, is that like a hint at what's coming? Is that an inspiration for this character to do something later on? Who's remembering this image and how, but there's so many things like that. So I'm like, I wondered like how much time does she spend preparing it? Because maybe she's just one of those people who's like, you know what, I may not make a movie every 2 years, but when I do, I've spent all this time really perfecting it. And the proof is in the pudding, because when she makes that film and it gets to the screen, it's almost difficult to argue that time was not well spent. It's completely impossible as far as I'm concerned, because every single detail is thought out. It's thoughtful. It's meaningful. It doesn't feel shoehorned in. It feels like she lived with the project enough to know what felt organic and right for each moment and crafted it. It's just mind-boggling. I do love that we have two directors in a row, I think, who are people who made movies more perfectly than almost anyone else I've ever seen. Completely different ends of the spectrum in terms of content, though. Completely. But I would love to hear what Andres has to say of his recollections, because this movie.
Oh, you actually own it.
I do. I bought the Blu-ray. I still have my screener from back when I reviewed it for when I was at Cal. It was that. I don't think I've ever actually watched this Blu-ray all the way through, because it's a really intense movie. It's not a movie that you just decide to watch. You're like, oh, you know what? I'll put this in. Like, okay, make a strong pot of tea.
It's
Before
also
Andres goes really quick. I just want to. So this movie we picked, obviously, we need to talk about Kevin. This came out in 2011, and for those who don't know what this is about, this is the IMDb plot. Kevin's mother struggles to love her strange child, despite the increasingly dangerous things he says and does as he grows up. But Kevin is just getting started, and his final act will be beyond anything anyone imagined.
Major trigger warning for everyone for the last 10 minutes of this movie.
Last 10 minutes? How about
Specifically, Amy, I can't say, don't goad me, because I can't say anything without ruining the entire film for people.
The whole movie is
the whole movie is Amy, you know what I'm talking about. Please stop talking about it, because I can't describe it.
The whole movie is traumatizing.
No, I know what I'm talking about, Amy. Specifically, I'm giving an actual trigger warning, not just movies disturbing. There are specific scenes that will be very triggering for people who have experienced violence. I'm trying to warn them about specific things, not just the whole movie is upsetting, because it is very upsetting.
It is. Okay. Yeah, Andres, you have the floor.
Well, how am I going to come after that? That's, oh my God. Well, I mean, all I can say is I agree with everything you were saying about Lynn, where so many things feel so natural yet so meticulously planned. In fact, that was kind of the vibe that I got on set when I was there, was that, you know, there wasn't necessarily, you know, working on a couple other film sets and stuff like that, you always sort of feel like you're just sort of standing there, and a lot of time and expenses and all this stuff is being wasted, and you're just kind of like, why am I here? Whereas with this, it kind of felt like boom, boom, boom. Like it kind of felt like there was a fast-paced nature to it, but it didn't feel, for lack of a better word, unplanned or unintentional. It just felt like someone who was very much in control and very much just had that energy and carried it over to any shot. And also, she was, I mean, you know, I might as well tell the story real quick.
Tell it.
All right. So literally, I had gotten back over to Connecticut for a little bit, and you know, a friend of mine had basically called me up and was like, "Hey, so you worked on a couple of sets before over in Chicago, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And we're like, "Well, they're shooting this thing over in Stamford, which is actually about 20 or 30 minutes away from my hometown." And so I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll show up and stuff like that." So I took the job, and I basically signed a couple NDAs and stuff like that. And then when I got over to base camp, it was just one of those things where, you know, there was this there was sort of a familiarity on the set where all the crew members, all the grips, all the keys were just kind of like, it kind of seemed like all these people became a family in this like 3 or 4 week shoot, I believe. And then so what ended up happening was, so this woman comes up and she's like, "All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We're gonna basically just try to, not necessarily try to get through this, but sort of just like, you know, we're gonna do this as best we can, and just know that, you know, we're all here for one another." And I was like, you know what? That was actually probably the best pep talk I ever had from an AD. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I found out that it wasn't the AD; it was actually Lynn.
Oh. And
she like you know, in all these other sets I've been to, you just kind of feel that the director sort of like an outside and like sort of like, for lack of a better word, it feels very impersonal on the set. Whereas with this one, it just kind of felt like, oh, you know what? We're all on a team together, and we're all a family. We're all trying to make the best thing possible. And and she just struck me as like just one of those people that you're like, man, you know what, I want to go above and beyond for her, like you know what I mean, like that energy was so infectious on the set. And you definitely need an energy like that, especially for the scenes that I was there shooting. So without getting into too many spoilers, it's the thing that Amy and Samir are talking about.
And then tell me, before we went live, you were telling me this story about how, like you were a PA on this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
I was a PA slash script assistant type of thing for basically I was just walking around with the grips and the PAs and stuff like that, and just grabbing like cables, like basically just whatever was free, just try to do. And then also during one of the night shoots, I was also what's called crowd control. So yeah, that, which again,
certainly an essential part of the crew, but not someone that necessarily was given the full script or even given the sides for that day.
No.
So with that, you didn't really know what this movie was about, or what exactly, like you had some grasp of what each day was being, filmed, but you said it wasn't until the movie came out and then you watched it.
Yeah, because the thing is that with this particular movie, you kind of get like a sense of like, oh, it's, we need to talk about Kevin. It kind of sounds like sort of like an indie darling type of thing where it's like, oh, of course it takes place in a high school. Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, I'd spent about 4 days on the set, and we shot a lot of the stuff over at the high school with the daytime exteriors for the first 2 days. And then for the third and the fourth day were all the night shoots. And it was such a stark contrast in terms of what kind of movie it was that that you were just like, oh, wow. Well, this is really going to be a trip when you watch it. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to spoil anything.
No, I know. You're doing a really good job, actually. You haven't given anything away. Mm-hmm. We know things that you've said, like, they're just basically reiterating when Amy read the plot, like you didn't give anything more away than what the plot description from IMDb was offering. So you're good. One thing that always has stood out in this movie is that Lynne Ramsay is as masterful a user of music as, say, like Wes Anderson is. But the meticulous use to which the songs are put will completely destroy the heartwarming vibes of those songs forever. The song Every Day by Buddy Holly sends a chill down my spine to this day. When I hear the tinkling of the xylophone in that song, it's like I'm in a cartoon and like Jerry or Tom or whatever is playing my spine like a xylophone and actually tapping on the vertebrae with every note in that song now, because it is what it, like, I felt like in that 2-minute sequence when you'll get there in the movie, like when she like runs to a bottle of wine and empties the whole thing into a cup to gulp it down, I'm like, I am right there with you. And I only experienced that one montage of you driving home on Halloween night. But also Beatles song in my room. Wait till you see how she ruins the beauty of that song, but also realizes its meaning in a really dark. Oh my God, it's so good. But like, I still remember the first time I watched it. By the end, I was just not speaking. I was just like so horrified, mouth like agape, unable to pronounce any words, like just so totally destroyed by this movie. It's just like still, obviously, I think should be remembered as one of the great films of this new century. Definitely one of the very best films I've seen of any kind in the last 20 years. Just like a level of mastery that is not often seen. And as far as I'm concerned, she can take as much time as she wants to make any movie she wants. I will be there when theaters reopen.
And with the reception of this movie, this was only nominated for 1 Golden Globe. That was Tilda Swinton. Wasn't nominated for any Oscars. I mean, the fact that Tilda Swinton alone wasn't nominated for Best Actress, like we picked this for a Director Tuesday. Had we not picked this movie for Director Tuesday, we certainly would have done a Tilda Swinton day. I would have picked this movie because this is the best thing I think I have seen her in. And she is such an interesting, diverse actress with these roles that she picks. But this movie just got completely snubbed in so many different ways. Even, just like best adapted screenplay. This is based off of a book.
Yes.
Lynne Ramsay just adapted the screenplay. But just like, and when I remember I saw this movie in theaters when it came out, I was just like, oh, what's this movie? This looks like really interesting and dark. And not really knowing a whole lot of what the plot was going to be. And this movie, among other things, Samir was talking about like all these like actual visual trigger warnings, but throughout the whole movie, it really is very disturbing and dark.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of psychological disturbing things, and then of course actual physical things that you see that are visual. But this movie basically confirmed for me that I don't know if I ever want to have children of my own, because I would feel terrible knowing that I brought a child into this world like this. Which is why I would probably adopt. Even if that kid turns out to be just as insane, at least it wasn't, I didn't do it, okay?
At least it wasn't genetic.
But that's kind of the main question of the story, is like one of the main questions. I mean, there's there's a lot of things that they not cram, but that they pack into this movie. Yeah. But like, one is nature versus nurture. Is someone, how much was the toxicity of this child nurtured by her reticence at being a mom to begin with, because she knew what was going to happen to her life, because she was, a successful person. She had a thriving career. She was happy with her life without kids. And her husband is really the one who, and the husband, I mean,
John C. Reilly.
That's another way that they really fuck with in this movie, because I hated her husband. I hate John C. Reilly's character. I don't mean I don't like his performance. I mean the character I'm really, really upset with, because he's so white male privilege oblivious to everything. And he just writes off. He's practically gaslighting his wife, even though he's not trying to. He really kind of is like, oh, you're just over exaggerating. It's not a big deal. And it's like, well, look what happens, everybody, when you just keep writing off numerous red flags as not a big deal. That leads to insanity, like we are living with now, but also in the character of Kevin. But you're so infuriated by her husband the whole time. Like, she's kind of right. She may not have wanted to be a kid and may have been a little too aggressive about expressing that. But she's also extremely right that there's something wrong here. And the title, you say that title to yourself, you are her trying to talk to her husband, because just like, oh, I'm fine. I got to keep my career. We got to have this big house. You get to keep popping out babies. And it's just, it's like it makes me really dislike him. And then she even finds a way to use that in the story, how the audience feels about those characters becomes a part of it. It's mind-boggling, like I said, how she juggles all these balls, and then I'm mixing metaphors here, but the way she weaves all these elements together into one cohesive whole is just a wonder to behold. And I feel like, at least we are going to take a deep descent on the roller coaster with this movie. But we're going to rise up again tomorrow with another movie that exhibits perfection from the musical comedy side.
So this
polar opposites.
Exactly. Again, we've just had 2 back-to-back movies of fun, gay, glitter musicals, which is like where I want to live in my life. And now we're going to this. So, I mean, if you haven't caught on by now, we've been talking about this movie for a while now. Like we've been warning since we announced this calendar for January. We already started warning people about this movie, where this really is one of the most haunting films I have seen. Several years went by between my first and second viewing of this film, and I remembered pretty much everything about it. There were so many scenes that I will remember for the rest of my life.
Very vivid impressions they make.
Yeah.
But the thing is too with this film, I would say that they're very vivid and they're very clear and deeply disturbing at certain points, but it's never overtly in the camera. It's all played in the way that Lynne directs the scene and allows the audience to connect two and two together and just go, "Oh my god!" Like, God, like scene in the kitchen when about halfway in, when she discovers what is in the kitchen, you don't see a single shot of what she's seeing, but you just go, "Oh my god!" You connect certain elements together, and you're like,
Yeah,
"That is royally messed up." And God, and I remember the first time I watched this was actually with my grandma. I was telling this story off camera, but I was watching. Yeah, my grandma was just like, "Well, you know what? What if we watch that movie that you worked on last summer? You know, I want to see some of your work."
God, Sonny.
You should have just told her you worked on American Pie or something. And
well, the thing is, my grandma and I, like, we watched a couple of movies together. Like, we watched certain things where it's kind of like, oh, you know what, R-rated stuff, that's totally fine. Like, she was just kind of cool in that way. But this was the one that by the end of it, I could tell really affected her, and she was just like, "Wow, that's." Like, I was like, "Oh my god, I'm sorry. I warned you about what I saw, but even still, you're not prepared for it. And when it happens, you are just still like in utter shock in terms of the very ending." But oh my goodness, I want to say so much more, but I'm gonna keep it back. I'm gonna keep it back off camera.
We'll just save some debate for. We can debate it after because we've all seen it. But
yeah,
I would also like
to. We cut. Well, the three of us, we could definitely talk about it.
It'll be interesting to talk about tomorrow where people fall in the nature versus nurture debate of this story. Because that isn't a completely ambiguous thing for me. It really goes by your own personal belief system. But I do remember the when I first had a talk with Linda Williams outside of class at Cal.
Linda Williams was one of the popular film professor at Cal, and
she's a world-renowned film theorist. She's one of the leading people in that field. You know, there was numerous times where she's like, "Oh, I'm flying to a conference in France. Can you get me a copy of your thesis draft so I can read it on the plane on the way over?" And I was like,
wow.
I'm working 3 jobs right now and I have too many credits. I don't have a draft ready yet, but I'll try. I loved her. She's an amazing professor, but I remember having this conversation. I just wanted to keep talking to her after the first class. And so I just followed some sick puppy or something.
Wow.
Like, you want to keep talking about movies? We're not done talking about movies, are we? You know, and somehow it came to this movie had just come out, and she's like, "Oh, did you see this film?" She fell in, at least at the time, she was very firmly in the camp of this was a case of nurture, not nature. That Kevin was not born this way. He was made this way by his mother's ambivalence about being a mother, and that the desire not to have this child somehow infected the child in a way and created this monster. And I was like, oh, and I didn't have time to really go through the whole theory, but she's a brilliant enough woman so that I know if I did sit and listen, she would probably convince me. I think it's a little more ambiguous than that because I don't. But it's so hard to say. But I can't wait to see what people think.
Yeah,
and that's the thing.
Also, watch for tonight. Yeah. As of now, this will be my third viewing. I'm in the side of this kid is evil.
Well, the thing is that with the direction, with the writing, there are breadcrumbs that lead into both ways. It just really comes down to which side of the field that you're more willing to look at. This is why I love it. This is why I love about this particular. It's going to sound so terrible. But this is what I love about this particular film. But how this film works is that you can go both ways, and you're not wrong in terms of what aspect. But yeah, this is. I'm just kind of curious as to what drink you're going to pair this with. Is it just straight up vodka, or is it just straight up an old fashioned?
I haven't been drinking as much since my month of Christmas cocktails. I think I'm going to need one tonight to get through this.
I think, let's see, either a glass of pine tar or some wood alcohol would probably be thematically appropriate considering the intense punch this film is going to give you to the gut. You need a drink.
Whatever makes me forget.
Oh, I got the perfect pairing for this. Just a massive bottle of wine, as Tilda Swinton has in the movie. There you
A
go.
massive bottle of wine.
It's on brand with the
and some tomato soup.
Oh, God.
Oh,
So this movie is available on Prime Video. If you have Prime, it is included. So if you end up being massively disturbed by it, just think that you didn't have to rent it. It's included in Prime. Again,
free trial of Prime.
Very, very disturbing film. Really not for everyone. If you've listened to us today and you're already like, nope, don't watch it. I mean,
it's totally okay.
Don't watch it. It really is not for everyone.
But it is a film that is, I think, necessary and important and absolutely brilliant. And I think if you love cinema as an art form, then perhaps join us as we descend into the depths of We Need to Talk About Kevin.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and I will even piggyback on that as well too, where this is one of Tilda Swinton's best performances, hands down. Like just the amount of emotion and hurt she carries throughout every scene. You're during certain scenes you're just like, man, you feel bad for her, but then certain scenes she's able to flip it, and you're just like, wow, this movie's getting me, like, just how life is. You're one way one moment, and then you're a completely different way in the next. But also on top of that, I don't think we talked. I mean, we're talking about Tilda Swinton, we're talking about the director, but I think a lot of people, especially now, overlook Ezra Miller's performance in it as well. Like just that personification of just freaking evil and sociopathic. It's just like, wow. Like for a kid that was 18 years old, that when he shot this, it was just like,
that is crazy to think of too, because he's still a teenager when he's making this, and in a lot of ways he's kind of like the quintessential just like nightmare teen. You're like, my moody know-it-all, shitty teenage son who just can't be satisfied with anything, and thinks, it's like, I feel like a lot of people kind of know somebody like this kid in a lot of ways. So it's like, throughout the movie, you're also kind of like, am I overreacting? Is he just another typical shithead teenager? And we're so in the mom's head that he's coming across this way. Like, but the movie doesn't really put you, I mean, it puts you in her mindset, but I don't think that the monstrousness of the character is just a product of that filter. But she erects that filter so that it makes everything a little bit more ambiguous for people. But like I said, you are 100% right about this. We could talk about it forever, so let's just let other people go and watch.
Yeah, and
the movie, and we'll keep going.
On Ezra Miller, this was the first thing I think I had seen him in, and it took me a while to see him in other films. And I mean, I like to think that for the most part, especially like as an actor, like I try not to be like, well, I just can't unsee that actor as this character, and thinking that like they could only play that type from now on. It took me a while to see him in other things and be like, okay, he's not evil.
By the time he was in Fantastic Beasts, you were like, okay, I can see you in other things. Although he's still kind of playing a lot of kind of like tormented.
Yeah, he has that look. He really
so like, I mean, it's kind of like you see Anthony Perkins in Psycho, and then suddenly nobody can unsee him from that role, and all the rest of his roles incorporate some element of mental instability or extreme emotional sensitivity in some way. Like, it's like you're getting some element of that role in every other role he plays forever after that. And I'm like, but I feel like I agree with you. I feel like that Ezra Miller has been able to, it took a while, because I had the same thing, but it took a while for him to start getting a more diverse types of roles. So at least you're not getting just tormented teen with Ezra Miller, and now he's like completely like, living his best queer life. And I'm living
going to be in the Flash
in public, in a dress or a Super Mario costume or whatever the hell else he wants to put on when he goes out. That I think has really helped set him apart from this role. Is the fact that his real life persona is much more fun and fancy free, if you will, than We Need to Talk About Kevin.
Exactly. But yeah, see the movie for yourself. I mean, there's a lot to think about with this film. Again, this is available on Prime. Tomorrow, we're doing a complete 180 again. Tomorrow, we're talking about actress Jeanette MacDonald and one of Samir's all-time favorite films, The Merry Widow, which I know he's super stoked to talk about. Completely different type of movie from today. So if this movie isn't your cup of tea, maybe tomorrow's is. But join us tomorrow as we discuss. We need to talk about Kevin after the film, and then moving on. Thank you, Andres, so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, guys, this is I'm so honored to be on this. Like honestly, I've always dreamed about like having like just like this discussion where you watch a movie every day and book club for movies type of thing. And just when I came across this, I was like, oh my God, like this is everything I've always hoped for. So honestly, and I love the discussion and I love what you guys are doing. So keep it up. Thank you so much for having me on board, guys.
Well, thank you for your insight. And again, you're one of our biggest fans. And thank you to all of our other fans who are watching today. I saw, if she's still watching, Nicole was back.
Yes, I saw Nicole.
Hey, Nicole.
Yeah, check out our Patreon too. If you like, I'm going to put that over in the comments. Again, we do not get paid to do this. So, if you like, if not, we still love you.
We do still love you.
We do. We genuinely do. Well,
thank you for all the love, guys. Oh my God, I see Crystal on here. Walter, I always interact with on here.
Yeah, we're a little family now. But thank you guys again. Please watch We Need to Talk About Kevin if you dare. Available on Prime. We'll see you guys tomorrow.